What's going on, guys? It's Steam from Wafflypie, and we're back for more Kerbal Space Program. So today we are finishing up the space station, the Waffly Station Delta, of course. And I'm doing something a little different today. I'm doing a quadruple launch. And so what you're seeing is 4 recordings that I did separately, one after another, in the order of top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and I have actually implemented an entirely new lift module as well, with a couple of these, because they were far too heavy to launch normally. And okay, so here we have an issue with the docking that I forgot to set up, and for the refueler, I ended up having to restart that flight because it came completely detached from the rest of it. So, but fortunately, none of the other ones had any problems like that. So here is most of the burning. This is where the orbit and for a couple of them the encounter burns were taken out. And you can see that for the docking array, which is the top left one, it was a bit heavier than the rest of them, and so I needed to. It took a little more time to get into orbit, as well as a little more fuel, and that actually ended up saving me time in the long run, and I'll show you that when we come to it. But for the rest of this clip, it's just me playing with the projected maneuvers and then carrying them out. So, and it's about to cut away to the next scene. So I'll see you then. Okay, so you can see here that the docking array encountered the station earlier in its flight path than the rest of them, and that's because I launched these all at different points of the station's orbit to see if I could narrow down when the best time to launch was. And so, forgetting how to do a docking procedure properly, I had burned directly towards it. And this you should take into account. You should never, ever, ever do. This is a bad way to get to a station, because all you're going to end up doing is burning up all your fuel and have a very high relative velocity that you're not going to have any way of canceling out in any reasonable amount of time, even with one of the strongest engines in the game like I have here. And so while that transfers over, I'll show you the rest of them. And again, most of it is just fiddling around with the maneuvers and trying to get a decent encounter, or closest approach at least, because most of them, it was a little difficult to find a first encounter within a couple tens of kilometers, and so I had to come around a second time because of all of the other launches were actually too early, whereas the first one was too late. So I did not end up finding a decent spot to fire. But back to the docking array here. I ended up burning towards it yet again to pick up some speed just so that I could bring it into a 1.6 kilometer closest approach. And I'm burning again so that it will come down even lower. But as you can see, the orbit goes right past it, and that is going to cause a bit of an issue. But while that is happening, I managed to bring some of the uh, other modules closer in, and there is oh, as you can see on the docking array, I have just detached from the launch stage, and this is oh, okay. I guess we'll look at that later, because here, okay, we're looking at the approach there. Yes, this is what I was talking about. See, the first approach was nowhere near it, but the other ones were. So a full orbit was required. And here back on the docking array, you can see I was trying to cancel out all the momentum, and I actually ended up passing it, and now it's drifting away. And it probably wouldn't have been such a bad problem if it weren't for the fact that I did run out of fuel in the more powerful stage. And so I ended up going into a physical time warp just so that I could speed it up, because it was literally just me burning in retrograde the entire time. And I did that for quite some time. And right there is where I zero the velocity and set it back to the target and begin picking up relative speed instead of losing it. And I'm now moving towards it instead of away. And so we'll come back to that when it's a little bit closer, because right now 10.7 kilometers is fairly far. And here I am losing the fairing, and that is one of my favorite parts to use just for the just for the finish. And back at the dock array, we're 5 kilometers in, and still picking up speed. And about that time, I noticed that we should turn around, so I did. And so now I'm burning away as we're coming dangerously close, within 3 kilometers. And fortunately, that is a very good time that I chose to burn, because as I came in, since I was slowing down, I managed not to pass it. And I zero my velocity within a kilometer, which is ideally what you'd want to do when you're docking. So, although I messed up on the first stage, second stage, not so much. And best part about that module is that I did not need any of the fuel that was left over, and so I could just put it all into the refueler. And of course, using RCS to fine-tune the velocity. And now all of the craft are within sight of the station, of course, other than the refueler that you can see there. It still has to perform a couple of maneuvers to get within. It looks like an angle plane correction right now, because like I mentioned last episode, the station is at a 1.3 or 1.6, I believe, inclination, and that is not ideal for docking. But of course, now after I've done this, it is too lopsided to correct, so it would be faster just to employ it into the docking. And now everything is within sight, and the comms array is actually coming very close, and you can see all of the other modules already attached. So you can tell that I did successfully get them on with no problems. And now comes the slow part. Well, not necessarily slow because I have sped it up by triple times the or triple times doesn't make much sense. I guess 3 times regular speed, just so that it's not so unbearable to watch them slowly drift towards the space station. And as you can see with the refueler, fortunately it did slightly miss because otherwise it would have hit. Because I did not completely zero out the velocity before it got there. Back up at the docking array, you can see the state that we left the station in, with simply the core and the undeployed solar panel arrays, which, as you can see from the other cameras, I did deploy, and you will see that on camera. So continuing right along, we have the slow drifting spacecraft coming into dock, and I have put on a light green lighting beam onto these docking array. I was originally going to have them so that they could light up the docking ports of the docking array, but at that point I was questioning the viability of its electric charge consumption, which turned out not to be a problem after all. But just to be safe, you definitely do not want something going dead as the comms array is about to do. And I believe it did actually go dead for quite some time while it was coming around to the station. We're out of 3 times time acceleration because now the docking array is docked onto the station. I noticed that it wasn't in line with the rest of the station. It was slightly rotated, and so I undocked it to fix that and then brought it right back in. But of course missed it because as with any other three-dimensional space-based game, it is somewhat difficult to judge a 3D environment on a 2D screen. And then I overshoot it again and miss the controls because sometimes they're backwards, sometimes they aren't. And now bring it in. And it does rotate a little bit, but I figure it's better just to leave it a little bit off than having to undock and do the whole procedure again. So that is how I left it, and that's how you would see it if I went on right now. Docked just like that because I did not touch it afterwards, and I'm just going to now change it into the normal. Or is it the radio? Oh, of course. I was looking around for different ways. Well, that orientation brings it straight up and down, very vertical in regards to the surface, or not in regards to the surface, but horizontal in regards to the surface, and therefore it would always point upwards, and as it orbited, it would rotate about its axis. And so here I detach what we did in the last episode and bring the docking bus, I suppose, up and away from the solar array, and I dock it eventually back up at the top. Oh, and there's the comms array coming in, and I deploy the satellites or the satellite dishes, and bring it in to dock. However, I was not satisfied with that the way it looked because it was very compressed in, and so I quickly deployed the Communitron 16s, which are the smaller antennae looking ones. And after I finished that, I undocked them and brought them back around, which you will see shortly. And here's the refueler coming in too. Coming dangerously close to the solar panels eventually. I'm not sure if it's there or no. It's after it makes the pass of the docking port. There's me trying to find the correct place to click on the antenna, and I was just looking around the station, thinking of the video there, but then I noticed, well, doesn't look the best, so I undock it, and fortunately the comms array is very light and easy to maneuver, and I bring it around. Oh, and the refueler has docked, and I spend the rest of the time there just dumping fuel into the orange tank because, unfortunately, it did use up the launch tank, or yes, the launch stage at least, getting there, unlike the ferry and the comms array. And so I did have to dip into some of the reserves to bring it in, and it was equipped with RCS, so it didn't need to go the whole way. But yeah, I did burn up a little bit of its cargo. Fortunately, though, like I said earlier, the docking array did come equipped with spare fuel, and so I took some of that and put it back into the orange tank. And if you look at the comms array, you can see I was doing a similar thing, having the SAS direct you towards the docking array, except since the comms array points the opposite of the docking port, I had it go towards the anti-target, or retro-target, whatever the term is, and eventually decided that that was not the best way to do it if you're attempting to use the IJKL keys to orient yourself, because you're going to lose a lot of you're going to lose your train of thought of which way you're moving very quickly, because you're changing your position in a third dimension while moving in a second. So There we go. In the first panel, you can see that I'm bringing the solar array back in after I detached it, and oh, I guess you don't get to see them being deployed because the comms array is now fully docked. And pan back out after this. There we go. And oh, we did end up missing it, but there is the solar panels fully deployed in the first panel. And in the second panel, I'm transferring the monopropellant from the docking array back into the refueler, though probably not the best place to keep it, although it is just kind of a general go-to for fuel. Although it doesn't matter where you keep your RCS because it's used equally through all containers if you turn it on. But with the first panel, we are now completed the mission, and I will just leave that mission complete up, and I will transfer the audio to the third panel, the ferry, because that is the one that gave me the most problems because of the heavy offset weight. Oh, there's the second and fourth panel finishing up. I can see myself scrolling around, and I'll explain in a second, or maybe I will not because there's still some time left. I just look around the station. But with the third panel, I did have that offset because there was still 600 units of liquid fuel in that tank, which I would have preferred to keep in there, just so that I could transfer it into the orange tank and have that just in case I needed to refuel something else. But of course, that is a very high volume and high mass place or part of the vehicle with no RCS propellers, which is another flaw, much like the solar the lift module of the solar array, as we saw last episode. And so now that all the other ones are done, I just zoomed in here. And I'm running dangerously low on monopropellant, trying to bring this thing in. And so eventually I just ditched it. And I decided, and you can see almost immediately the ferry docks, because it just needed that little bit of magnetation to bring it in that the extra mass was preventing it from doing. And I did this actually with the comms array too. I brought the RCS bus on the top out and tried to go and get it, but it would have had literally the same issue, and I spent 40 minutes on that, so good waste of time. Anyway, this has been Dean from Wafflypie. I'll see you guys next time.